Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Lamed Hey in Nizir. We're about halfway down the page yesterday in the discussion about the difference between ribui and miyut versus klal prado klal. Now, we had the sheet of Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer says not only are you forbidden from eating grapes, grape products, wine, grape juice, but even the shoots and the leaves. Why? Because he learns it out of a ribui and miyut, and ribui and miyut just excludes very little twigs, but more is included, even the shoots and the leaves. Whereas the Chachamim learn out from klal prado klal, ema prat al masha, but not klal prat is ema chal masha prat. Prado klal prat is ka'ena prat, anything which is like the prat, and that includes even unripe grapes or worm-eaten grapes, etc. So the Gemara now deals where we're about halfway down the page for a Belazar. It's literally halfway down the page. It's between the Tosas that begins with Shnei Chartzanim to the Tosas begins with Savar. Between the second and third Tosas there in the middle of the page in the Gemara. Rav Lezer Darsh Meriva. Rav Lezer learns out the Surim of Nizir from Ribu Miyat. How does he know the concept of protocol? Prat means a specification, a klal, a generalization, and then another prat. If it follows that way, how does he know those rules? The rule is that protocol prat, ka'ena prat, anything like the prat. Knowing where does he get it from? So he learns it from a different pasuk. Amar Ravu, Nafkale Ravu says he learns that from this pasuk. It says by a shomer, the chiyitin isha re'ehu. If a man gives, if Reuben gives to Shimon something to watch, the Balabais gives the shomer something to watch. What does he give him? So the pasuk says chamor oshor oseh. Gives him a donkey or a bull or a sheep. So from there, that's the prat, a particular item, an animal of some sort, like a donkey, a bull, or a sheep. And then it says v'chol behema, or any kind of an animal. That's a klal. That's a generalization. Lishmor, to watch chazo parat. You got to watch this item, right? So it says chamor or shor. So that's the prat. Then it says kol behema. That's a klal. Then it says lishmor, to watch this item, chazo parat. Protocol prat yatadan elkein prat. So what is this? What would the generalization include? What would the miyut include? So here Rashi helps us out. Rashi says, if it would just say kol behema, any kind of an animal, I would think of a wild animal too, like a lion or a bear, something of that sort. Lishmor. Then it tells you no. Chazer prat. Lishmor is something that's capable of being watched. Ilga prat. But the hani prat the basra, the last prat. If it would just say prat uklal, you could say klal includes everything, even wild animals. It tells you lishmor, the prat, that it's got to be something you can watch, right? To tell me that something that's bar shmir, that's capable of being watched, to the bishmar naleh. That's when you make a shvua, talking about the shamachinim, has to swear that he hasn't been negligent in any way. So there, the extra lishmor teaches me that it's got to be something that's capable of being watched. What does that include? Includes even things that are not mentioned in the pasuk. The first prat said donkey or ox or sheep, but you know what? The second prat comes to include anything like it, which includes even birds. Yatsu Dumarabs, excluding bears and lions. They can't be watched. They don't have any. Can't domesticate them. So that's what he learns out. That's how he knows klal protocol. Why did I tell you a prat and then a klal prat? To teach me this lesson, that it's not after something that it doesn't have to be that particular animal, a donkey or a shore or a set. It doesn't have to be those things. It could be anything that's capable of being watched, even birds or other items as well. Anything that's capable of being watched. That's the first Rasha of Ravu. Rava says, I have a different Rasha. He says, listen, Nafkal Mehakra, you learn from the pasuk at the beginning of Ayikra, the very beginning, Parak Aleph, pasuk Yud, talks there about talking about if you want to bring a carbon ola. So it says that let's say you want to bring it from sheep. It says like this: Rav Amar Nafkal Mehakra. The im min, what Rashi actually quotes the whole pasuk. Yes, this Rashi is not exactly what our normal Rashi, because he gives you all these psukim. He says im men atzon karbarno min aksavim o min aizim laola zochata mikaber. If you want to bring it from sheep, you could bring it either from sheep or goats, right? Im men atzon, son refer to sheep and goats, from flocks really. Im men atzon from flocks then you bring it either from sheep or from goats. For an ola, zachar tam, it's got to be an unblemished male. That's what the pasuk says. So Yidarshan is like this: min from prat. Not everything. Some. Min means from them, some of them, not all of them. Hatzon klal. That's a generalization. All kinds of flocks. Kvasam v'izim. Then he tells you sheep and goats. Chazapart. There's a prat again. There's your prat of klal. Yet prat. What is he teaching me there? What's the prat klal teaching me? So Rashi again helps us out. Min prat. Hatzon klal. What would include? Even animals that terrible sins have been committed with. For example, Rova Manirfa, animals that would committed bestiality were committed with them, even though that doesn't make them non-kosher if you shecht it and eat it in your house, but you can't bring it as a korban. Here we're talking about korbanos. So if it would say just hatzon, you would say including even animals that bestiality was committed with. Muksa v'nevad, right? Maybe even an animal that was set aside for avodah zarah, or the avodah zarah was worshipped on it, or esnan, or things given as a payment for the hire of a prostitute, umachir, or something that was exchanged for a dog. That's what I would think. Hatzon includes all kind. Then it doesn't mean except no, only certain ones. All these are excluded. So what is included? In other words, it's not just any simple animal. The trouble could go about. Let's say let's say use the animal to plow or plant or whatever on Shabbos. Okay, so that's also, you did a sin with it, but it's not as terrible a sin as the sins mentioned before of doing avodah zarah with it, or worshiping it, worshiping it, doing avodah zarah with it, set aside, or animals that bestiality was committed with. So there again, we have the min is the prat, then we have hatzon is the klal, the generalization, specification, then generalization, and then afterwards another prat teaching me not only what's specifically mentioned in the pasuk, but even things which are other things are included too, not just a regular sheep or a goat, even a goat or a sheep that work was done with it on Shabbos, that an aveira was done with it on Shabbos is included as well. That's the prat. Says the Gemara, why did you go to pasuk yud, right? Pasuk yud in Parak Aleph, which is a pasuk we just got. Look at the beginning, back in pasuk Beis, the second pasuk in the whole book of Vayikra. Gemara says, Amalei Rav Yehuda midiskarta. Rav Yehuda said to Rava, why'd you go to pasuk Yud? Look back in pasuk Beis. V'leilith min adenkra. Learn from this pasuk. Min prat. There's a prat again from ha behema. The second pasuk in Vayikra says, Dara Reis Rav Matliam Adam kiyakar mikem karban lashem. Min ha behema min abakar. So min is a prat. Ha behema is a klal, and min abakar min atzon is also another prat. So why don't you learn from min prat, have maklal, bakar b'tzon, chazer parat. Now the prat, so you have prat or klal or prat, yet the prat. It's got to be something like that. And Rashi says over here, min abema, min bakar, min atzon is min is the prat. The mashma min abema below kol abema. Habema includes everything, even wild animals like a chaya, filu chaya, the chaya b'chalal behema. When we talk about behema, we mean chaya also, as we're going to see the pasuk in a second. So maybe that includes chaya. Then we have minabakar minatzon telling me no chayas, right? And what would you include? You include even animals that are young or old. The Ola Rashi brings down at the end, says ba bacher comes a young appish ain't osham ba bacher. Osham must get come from a ram, a 2-year-old, but an Ola could even be 1-year-old. Basham ba second, he takes out that last couple lines. It doesn't exactly make sense. The Bach changes that, but in any case, you see that. What's included, even a younger or an old animal is good for an ola, was excluded as a chaya. So why didn't she learn it from pasuk Beis in Vayikra? Again, in the Gemara, min is prat, habema is a klal, bakar b'tzon chaser b'prat, prat uklal uprat, yet din elka prat. So it's like the prat again, only an animal that is not a chaya. It's got to be something that's not an animal, something like bakar b'tzon, that only those could be brought as karbonos. For example, even a kosher animal, we've talked many times about a tzvi, a deer, it could be kosher, but it can't be used as a carbon. A carbon can only be a shortcut of ways. The last line of the page on the Gemara. You can't learn it out from this pasuk Beis over here. It talks about mina behema bakar sam. I would think of behema. Chai is included too, even though you say over here that there's an exclusion. That chaya is b'chal behema. Even though you exclude, there's an exclusion there, so an exclusion might exclude something else, but not chaya. Why? And Rashi says the chsiv zosa behema asher tochelu. Pasuk says in Dvarim, these are the animals that you can eat. Then he goes on to list ayol v'tzvi, v'yachmor. Right? A tzvi is a wild animal, a deer. So therefore, right? He says chaya behema. How could you say that it is excluded by that? Chaya is a kind of an animal. How could you say that it's excluded? Bakar v'tzon. He says, what do you mean? How could you say chaya is a chal behema? The chaya b'chal behema. In other words, you can't email some mina de behema. Chaya is also included. He says, what do you mean? Chaya can be included. It says bakar v'tzon. Okay, so therefore he argues back and forth, and he says no, that either one, either pasuk yud or pasuk beis, can either be used as a prad or klal. So now the Gemara says, uminolim dachiyu. How do we know this? Right? The Gemara says right here. Tosa says, arabarin koi dashaliel klal prat uklal umarba keina prat. Right? The boy minon the mida zubatora hainu the medrash keina the tanya v'asata kesef below. Okay, so he's going, we're just saying, how do we know? We see over here, these are different cloud product, right? We have the one from Shomer, Chinam, and we have the one from the two from Korban Ola, one from Pasuk Yud and one from Pasuk Beis. So we have those, but how do we know how to darshan them? We know the Hachi Rashi says the Kain Prat. How do we know that that's the rule? Okay, we have a product. How do you know that the rule is again? Prat uklal, the klal is most of our prat. Klal prat and the klal mashaba prat. How do we know that this idea that if you have a prat klal, what's the rule? Not that it's only the prat, but it's anything like the prat. Where do we get this from? We get this from Meiser Sheni. It says with Meiser Sheni when you bring it to Yerushalayim, it says, but nasata kesef, you take the coins, the money, whatever you would desire. That's a klal. Buy whatever you want. Whatever you want to eat, you can buy. Salami sandwich, whatever you want. But bakar its own. Then it says bakar and so animals, right? Animals, that's cattle and flocks. Uyayim v'shecher, and drink, right? Buy wine or strong drink. That's the prat, specific items that you can use the money for. Then another klal at the end. Anything that you want. This is, notice we are jumping a little bit. Why? Because before on Amar Aleph we said, okay, Rabbi Lazar who dashes miyat bariba, how does he know protocol prat? We learn protocol prat over here. The Chachamim learned this out from the case of Yain B'Shecher, the case of Nazir, right? He says Yain B'Shecher Yazir, that's the prat, right? And then we have what? Dash the klal protocol. Yain B'Shecher is a prat. Because she asked me again, that's a klal. Chatzan Mazag, that's the prat. So that's their prat. How does Rabbi Lazar know? Rabbi Lazar darshans over here by Nazir, he learns from Ribu Yumi, another way to learn, but it's not that he disagrees with the whole concept of klal prat or prat klalu prat. He holds of it. We say it every day in davening, right? Do we? We'll see. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Yud Gimel Midos, right? Klal prat is mentioned there, but not prat klalu prat. We can talk about that. But at this point, we're saying, how does Rabbi Lazar know the concept of prat klalu prat? So we said either from one of these, either from Shomer or from either of the two psukim that talks about Bayanola. But then he says, Uminola and Da'achiyu, how do we know the Ka'ena Prat? How do we know the general concept that we learn something when we have either Prat or Klal Prat or Klal Uprat Uklal, that the drasha is anything like the Prat? Not exactly the Prat, but if you have a Klal Prat, the rule is it's only what's listed in the Prat, nothing like the Prat. It's got to be exactly the Prat only that specific item. If it's Klal Prat Uklal or Prat Uklal Prat, then it's Cain. How do we know that? The case of Meiser. By Meiser tells you there's a generalization. Then it's a bakar sanyayim shecher prat. Then it's a chashat nafshecha chas v'kol klal prat klal yetodan eina prat. Ma prat before is just like the prat is explicit. What is the prat excluded? What are the common denominators of bakar sanyayim and shecher? that ma prat meforish pri mipri. It's something that grows from another. Animals grow from their mother, from their parents, right? And fruits, grapes, etc., grow from their parent, the tree, the vine. The gidule karka, and it grows out of the ground, gets its nourishment from the ground. Af kol pri mipri, anything basically that has a parent, anything that has a parent, and the gidule karka, and it grows out of the ground, is included. What would that include? So it would include even even fish, even birds, let's say, that also get their nourishment from there. But it would not include fish. Fish do come from their parents, right? They grow from their parents, but they're not gudele karka. They grow they're in the water. They're not gudele karka. So if it has these tributes, it's got the tributes that Bakr, Tzon, Yain, and Shecher have. They all come, so to speak, from a parent. They grow from a pre, grows from another pre, and it grows out of the ground, right? Because the Bakr and so on get their nourishment from the ground. Yain Shecher obviously comes out of the ground. So that's what's included. So therefore, Rashi tells us, Mepri v'gidul karka v'srabalu, ofos, birds are included. We exclude fish. They don't get their nourishment from the ground. Okay, so therefore, that's how he learns it out from, because he tells you specifically, it's got to be something like those things. But notice this was a klal uprat uklal, and Rav we're talking about prat uklal uprat. Okay, so now the Gemara says michti klal uprat uklal ke'ein pratadani. We learn it, but it's got to be like the prat, something like the prat, not exactly the prat, but something like the prat. The prat was mentioned animals, bakar and son. We said even birds too, because birds are similar to animals because they have parents and they get their nourishment from the ground. All right, but what do we need the last klal for? Klal basra mayhani. What does that help? And as we're explaining, when it says klal uprat, just say klal. You have a klal, you have a prat, anything like the prat. No. Ahani lo sufe called the damile, to include anything like that. In other words, because if you would have, if you only have the klal prat, you would say ein b'chlal elamashu b'prat. What is the extra klal to include? Anything that's like the prat. Again, at this point, we're saying it. We're going to say it again. The klal uprat uklal. What's the rule? Ke'ena prat. What's the rule of prat uklal uprat? Also ke'ena prat. Those two are the same. In fact, we'll take the time to mention it now. Because if you look at Rabbi Shmuel Omer, which we say every day, supposed to say it every day, right? What do we say every day? Rabbi Shmuel Omer, we say of the klalos, we say Kal v'chomer, Zera Shava, Binyan Mikaseh, Klalu Prat, Ein B'chal Mashal Prat, Prat Uklal, Klal is most prat, Klal Uprat Uklal, number 6, Klal Uprat Uklal, Iatadon Elokena Prat, it's like the Prat. What about Prat Uklal Uprat? It's not mentioned here. Some say that Rabbi Shmuel Taka argues he doesn't know the prat or klal. That would be difficult because we have many of those in the Gemara. Prat or klal or prat. So some say no. It mentions the 13 that have different halachas, but the klal or prat or klal has the same halacha as the prat or klal or prat. Has the same halacha. What does that mean? The same halacha, meaning that you learn it ke'ena prat. It doesn't have to be exactly the prat, but it's ke'ena prat, and therefore that's why it's not mentioned. Okay, but the halacha is mentioned. It says klal uprat uklal. It doesn't say prat uklal uprat in the Yigum Amidas. Why not? Either because Rabbi Shmuel argues, or because it's really included the same halacha as klal uprat uklal. So the Gemara now says, okay, klal basra ma'hanalei. Unless if it called anything like that. V'su prat uklal uprat. Again, the prat uklal uprat ke'ena prat. You learn it also. It's like the prat, not exactly the prat. It doesn't have to be the prat itself, but it's like the prat. Prat basra mayanu. What is a prat? What do you need the last one for? Just say prat uklal. Ila prat basra fuin prat. I would say nasa klal mosef ala prat. That's the rule. Klal prat ein mechal masha prat. Prat uklal, number 5 in Rabbi Shmuel's list. Prat uklal is klal mosef, adds on everything, not only the prat but everything else. What is the last prat? Tell me no, not everything. Only something like the prat. Okay. Back in the Gemara, umichte train klale uprata. Whether it's 2 klals and a prat, or train prat to the klal, or 2 prats and a klal, the same halacha. The outcome is the same. Ke'ein prat daininan. You learn it the same way. It's like it has to be like the prat, not exactly the prat. What's the difference between them? What's the difference then between klal prat or klal, or prat or klal or prat? Ika the ilu tartin call if you have two clouds uprata. Ika prata the domile afilu b'chad sad marvinan. What do we say before? We said in the case of Meiser Shteni, you have to bring something like the Bakar Tzon Yaim Shecher. What is it? What are the two attributes there? The two attributes. I said tributes. The two attributes. I said tributes. Two attributes. What are the two attributes? The two attributes are that they have a parent. Animals have a parent. The fruits have a parent. They grow from another one, and they get their nourishment from the ground as opposed to fish. But fish do have one attribute. They have parents. So he says like this: if you have two clouds and a prat, right? If you have two clouds, it's more inclusive. Yes, they're both like a prat, but if you have two clouds and a prat, that's more inclusive. You have two generalizations and one specification. So if it's like it, in other words, if you're talking about adding fish in, fish is similar to the animals and to the fruits in the sense that they all have parents, right? So that's good enough. Because two clouds and a prat is more inclusive than two prats and a cloud. So even if on one attribute it's there, it's got a parent, that's good enough. We would include it. Trey prat to cloud, but if you have two prats and a cloud, if you have a prat which is similar in what? Both ways, meaning both it's a parent and it gets nourished on the ground, you would learn it. Oh, so if that's the case, what about the case of Meiser Sheni? There we had two clouds and a prat. So you would include fish as well. You would include fish as well if you're talking about including two. So now the Gemara says, Michti, prat u cloud. If you have just prat u cloud, nasa cloud, mosif ala prat, just look at it. Forget about now the two clouds and a prat or the two clouds. Let's go back to a prat and a cloud versus miyat bariba. So he said, again, we're like setting up the order over here. We're making Seder, as they say, right? Making Seder. Let's understand them all. Okay. Nichti says, Prat uklal. What's the rule of Prat uklal? Nasa klal, most of all of Prat. Adds on a lot more. It's Rabbi Kome, everything is included. Prat is mentioned. Then he tells you klal to include everything. Miyat for riba, if you have a limitation and then an amplification. Nami riba hakol includes. This Rabbi Kome. So ma'ika be miyat for riba la Prat uklal. What's the difference if you learn it from miyat bariba to versus protocol? Either way, you're adding on everything. Ika the ilu protocol marvin and afilu olam lulav. If you have a protocol, you would include even leaves and lulav in the case of a nizir, as we mentioned before. Protocol includes everything. Protocol miyat bariba, but if you have miyat bariba, even though you might say it includes a lot more, but it's still there's a miyat there. Something has to be limited. Lulav ain olalo, so he only includes the shoots and not the leaves. And that's what he said. That's what we said. So therefore, the protocol includes everything. Miyat Veriba includes almost everything, but there's still a miyat there. So it's got to exclude something, so it excludes the leaves. So all the mafarshim deal with, some have a different gears over here because this doesn't make sense because we had yesterday on the base. Rabbi Lazar says, why does Rabbi Lazar say that a nazir is forbidden even from eating leaves and shoots of the vine? Why? Because he learns that out from miyat bariba, right? That's what he says. He says, Rabbi Lazar Darsh, ribuya mita, miyam sheikh yazar miyat, because she has to be up on a riba. Miyat riba kol includes everything. My riba kol melee. What does he exclude? He excludes twigs. That's all he excluded was twigs, but he includes the leaf. Here we're saying that if you learn miyat riba, only the shoots, not the leaves. So take a look at Rashi over here, about halfway down the page. Even with the Neschos Harivan there in the on the side, miyat for riba, it's got to exclude something. There's a miyat there. So he includes the shoots and not the leaves. Presumably the shoots are more edible maybe than the leaves. The olim memai. The imtamai, you might say, but we just had yesterday Darish miyat for riba, but kamaisi nami. Oh, and he includes leaves also that are included in the prohibition of a nazir, that he can't eat leaves of a vine. He doesn't learn olin from the riba miyat. He says mikola sheyas megefen. What was the riba in the miyat? Miyat miyayim shecher. That's the miyat. Mikola sheyas megefen. It could have just said miyat asher yas megefen. What's the mikol? That he doesn't learn out just the miyat. He learns off the extra word mikol. They said mikola sheyas megefen yayin. The high mikol lishim say it's extra word there. Call. That also would be a ribui. What's mikol lamli? El rabas afilu olim. That's how Rashi answers the kasha. Tosfos answers it differently. Some have a different years in the Gemara. Isma Farsh, some say the high, Visnam Farshi, the high, the Omar, Afilu all in Lav Dafka. When he says over here, when he said over there on Amid Beis, yesterday, he said, when Rabbi Loza explained on yesterday's Daf on Amid Beis, that you learn out from Miyat Riba, Miyat is Yain Sheikh, Riba includes everything. My Riba called me, my Miyat Shebesh. So what does he include? He includes everything else like Olin and Lulavim, right? Like the leaves and the shoots. Some say the Haidamar Afilu Olin Lav Dafke, El Kamashma de Portu. I'm just telling you that it includes something. Olin or Shabishta, either the leaves or the twigs. So it excludes something. So it's not Lav Dafka that he's excluding something, or it could be also that when he explains over here Miyat Riba, Riba Lulav and Olin Lo, it could be that really goes like a blaza, that all are included. He's just trying to tell you that the meat is excluding something. In other words, when our Gemara over here says, where we finished up here, product includes everything. Meat riba, okay, so lulav and olin lo. Well, that doesn't fit in with Rabbi Loza yesterday because Rabbi Loza includes lulav and olin. The answer is that maybe olin lo is lav dafka. We're just trying to say that you exclude something. Maybe lulav and olin are both included, and the exclusion is the twigs, like we saw in the Gemara. This is haidamar afilu olin lav dafka. Kamashman deportu. That's let me say something is included. Olin or but something is excluded, but it's lav dafka steer with Rabbi Loza. Then he ends off. He says, "Ubein miyat v'riba l'riba miyat v'riba leker v'lo midi." There is no difference between miyat v'riba, where it's a limitation and then an amplification, or riba v'miyat v'riba. There's no difference. There's no difference between miyat v'riba. As we said, there's really not much. There is a little bit of difference between klal u'klal and prad u'klal u'prat because they're both. We say it's ka'ena prad, but the Gemara makes an afkamina. He says klal u'prad u'klal. The two klals of the prad includes more even things which are similar only in one aspect, only have one attribute, whereas two prats in the klal, they must be totally similar. Okay, you can make that difference, but as we said, Rabbi Shmuel doesn't list it as a separate one. But here he tells you that miyat v'riba, versus versus riba umiyat v'riba, there is no difference. They have the exact same halacha. Okay, tomorrow's Gemara starts off. We'll just start it off now because it's the topic that we saw in the Mishnah, where Rabbi Kiva said even if you don't have to drink. The earlier Mishnah said you have to drink a revius of wine to be over. Rabbi Kiva said even if you dunked your bread in the wine and you had enough there for a kazayis you're chayiv. So the question is, does he mean a kazayis of wine, which could be that a kazayis of wine, according to some Shis, is the same as a revius. Revius is the liquid form, and if it was in a dry form, it could be the equivalent of a kazayis. Or maybe he goes, no, even when it comes to wine, it's not an issue of a revius. A kazayis is good enough. What do you mean a kazayis? A displacement. If you took an olive in a cup of wine, put an olive in there, and the amount of wine that fell out of the cup, the amount that you displaced, that's the amount of wine that would be also okay. But now we come to the question of, he said, even if you dunk your bread in the wine and came up with a kazayis, that means a kazayis of wine or a kazayis of wine and bread together. Right? Here's it gets to the question. Amar Abavu, the last couple lines on the page. Amar Abavu, Amar B'Yochanan, Kol Yisrael Shabbatorah, all this on the Torah, Ein Heter Mitzal Fiyas. I mentioned this yesterday. If I have, let's say, a piece of chazer, and I have half a kazayis of chazer, and I want to taste what does chazer taste like. I know I'm a bad boy. I'm not supposed to eat it at all, but I know I'm not going to get malchus, even if I did it with Adam and Asra. I'm not going to get malchus unless I eat a kazayis. So I take a piece of bread. I'll take the bun. Right? I'll take a little piece of a cheese of a hamburger, non-kosher hamburger, and I'll take a little piece of it with a bun. Okay, but with the bun, it comes to a kazayis. That's the question. No, that doesn't end. You can't say that the bun, which is mutter to eat, bun is, let's say, kosher, and that's mitzaref to the isser. We don't say that. If you only had a half a kazayis of a non-kosher hamburger, you're not chayav. Even if with the bun you had a kazayis, even if the bun with the tziruf of the combination of the bun and the piece of the burger, you had a kazayis all together, but the bun doesn't count. The bun's kosher. So heter doesn't add on to the isser to make the whole thing into a kazayis of isser. Chutz misur naz, except for Nazir, Sharayamer Torah Mishras. They're coming except for Nazir, because the Torah says Mishras, anything soaked in the wine. As if to say that the bread soaked in the wine also has halacha of wine. And if you have a half a kazayas, let's say, of wine and a half a kazayas of bread, but together there's a full kazayas, that would be high for that too. That's how the Gemara ends off. The Gemara, tomorrow's Gemara, we'll see more. Does it apply also to chametz and to other things as well? But here's what he says, that normally the heter is not mitzvah to Isser, but for Nazir it is mitzvah because of mishras. Because of the word mishras, everything is included. But Rabba Shiur lohavi Isser Nazir kashir the heter mashlim lekazayis you're in that case. That's what Rabbi Vu and Rabbi Yochanan says, and we'll pick up from here tomorrow. We'll discuss this more and more deep. Have a good day.